Hi guys, section 4 today, we're finishing up chapter 15, and we're kind of reviewing some stuff, specifically the water cycle. So before I get into today's lecture, just a quick review, okay? So we've got all this water on the ground, okay? I'm covering basically the ocean right there, so don't worry about that. That water evaporates, okay? Evaporates and turns into water vapor and gets into the air, okay? So the atmosphere is filled with all kinds of water vapor. Well, if that water vapor cools enough, it condenses into these clouds, okay? And we're going to talk about both of those things today. Well, if the water condenses into large enough droplets, okay, we talked about in the last lecture precipitation, then it actually falls back to the earth as precipitation, okay? So those three main steps of the water cycle are really what we're talking about today, okay? Again, evaporation is just that liquid form of water turning into its gaseous form, known as water vapor. And what's happening is, so you've got water, okay? The top surface of the water, those water molecules are actually escaping, okay? They're leaving their liquid molecules, and I really shouldn't say it like that because water molecules are water molecules no matter what state they're in. When they're close together, they're liquid, okay? So the ones on the top are just spreading out enough that they're actually becoming a gas, okay? And that's really what evaporation is. Humidity is just a description of how much water vapor there is in the air, okay? And then relative humidity is a percentage based on the maximum amount of water vapor the air can hold. So that changes depending on temperature, depending on where you are. And so the maximum would always be known as 100%, but 100% might be different amounts in different areas, different climates, okay? So if you hear that the relative humidity is 75%, that means there's still some room for additional water vapor in there, okay? When it hits 100%, typically it means it's going to start raining. It's going to start condensing and coming back because it can't hold any more of that water vapor, okay? The reason it feels so hot when it's humid out is because there's actually less ability for evaporation to happen. When we sweat, that sweat evaporates off of our skin and that helps cool us down, okay? Well, when it's really humid outside, that relative humidity is really high, that sweat's not going to evaporate because the air can't hold any more water vapor. So the sweat just stays there and it covers us and it's like really uncomfortable and it feels really warm. That's why. And then finally, we've got another instrument to talk about. We talked about an anemometer last lecture. You know, a thermometer measures temperature. Well, a psychrometer is used to measure the humidity in the air, okay? All right, so once that air evaporates, let me move myself a little bit lower here. Give me a second. There we go, just so you can read that. Once the water evaporates and it becomes water vapor, eventually we're going to go into the next level of the water cycle, which is condensation, okay? And that's how clouds form. All right, so warm air rises off the surface and it takes water vapor with it, okay? The warmer the air is, the more water vapor it can actually hold. As it rises, it cools down, and then if it cools enough, it's going to cause that water vapor to kind of cuddle together because it's cold, okay? So the water vapor wants to get closer together. As it's condensing closer together, it actually is going to turn back into a liquid, okay? But it needs something to condense on. So remember when we talked about all the stuff that's in the atmosphere and we talked about those particles of dust, particles of smoke? Those are what actually allows this condensation to occur, okay? These little individual molecules of water hug to those particles, and then more come, and then more come, and then eventually there's enough of them that it's actually liquid, okay? The dew point is just the temperature at which that condensation occurs, okay? So when you look outside, when you can see clouds, it's actually really clear today. There doesn't look like there's any clouds in the sky, but when you watch this, maybe there will be. Those clouds are made up of tiny liquid droplets of water. And remember, if you can see it, it's liquid, okay? If you go outside and it's totally clear, it doesn't mean there's not water up there. It just means it's in its gaseous form. It's water vapor. If you can see a cloud, that's actually tiny little droplets of water, okay? When those get big enough, when those droplets get big enough, then they fall as precipitation. But when they're that small, they just kind of hang out up there. If you're boiling water on the stove and you see steam above it, that's actually liquid water as well. If you can see it, it's a liquid, all right? Okay, so we've got all these different types of clouds, okay? And you've seen this, sometimes the sky looks very different than others. There's three main types that we talk about. The first type are cumulus clouds, and that's these guys down here, okay? And they're real fluffy and cottony. They're the ones that you just feel like you could lay down in and take a nap, okay? They are usually pretty low, right around 2 kilometers. They can build up much taller than that, but then they've become known as these cumulonimbus clouds. And those are potentially storm clouds, and we'll talk about those more next chapter. The cumulus clouds themselves usually indicate fair weather, okay? Second type are these stratus clouds, and they're not as pretty as the cumulus clouds. They're really low and they're flat, and they just kind of, sometimes there's a few of them. Sometimes there's a lot. When they cover almost the entire sky, when you go outside and it's like entirely cloudy and just kind of blah looking, those are known as nimbostratus clouds, okay? And then our third kind are cirrus clouds. And those are super high. If you've ever gone outside and it looks like God took a paintbrush and just kind of made some paint strokes up in the sky, those are cirrus clouds. They're very wispy, kind of feathery clouds, very high up in the sky. And those are usually actually ice crystals, okay? Again, if you can see it, it's not water vapor. Those really high cirrus clouds are mostly ice crystals. Now, looking at this diagram, looking at this poster, looking at, let's see, page 491 in your book, you can see there's many different types of clouds than just these cumulus, stratus, and cirrus clouds. And they're combined together and they're given different names: nimbostratus, altostratus, cirrocumulus, altocumulus, all these different things, because clouds are complicated. And the weather patterns are related to the different types of clouds, okay? Lastly, this is kind of a type of cloud, but it's not one of the main types of clouds. That's why I kind of left it to the end. Fog. If you've ever gone outside on a really foggy day and it's hard to see, fog is simply a cloud that is on the ground. They don't typically form that low, but certain times conditions are right, and basically you're walking through or driving through a cloud when it's foggy. So this is something to look forward to. These are both cumulonimbus clouds. This one right here, I actually took this picture driving into St. Louis. Man, coming from California, we don't see clouds like that. I didn't know if a tornado was coming or what, but it was a massive rainstorm that came in. You could almost see how that cloud is like swollen with rain. So this one over here, it's got this flat top to it, and that's kind of the defining feature of these cumulonimbus clouds. The cumulus clouds are these really nice fluffy ones on the bottom, but when they build up on top of themselves, they quickly become storm clouds. So next chapter we're going to talk about like tornadoes and thunderstorms, and both of those are types of severe weather that form in those cumulonimbus clouds. Okay, so we'll talk about that more next chapter. All right, that's all for now. Talk to you guys later.